Welcome to a broadcast recorded here now live, later to be reproduced at 9 o'clock Irish time. We are studying the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, 17th chapter, and this is to do with the three types of faith. Everybody believes in something. Everybody has faith that the sun will rise in the morning and set in the evening. Everybody has faith that without any effort, food will be digested, and they have free grace in order to think interesting and creative thoughts. Many things we take for granted. This comes under the category of faith. And this chapter explores all the different types of faith and also other varieties that fall into a categorization of three. Last week, we dealt with the three types of food. And I mentioned spiritual life begins with food. Because depending on what we absorb through the senses, this becomes our habit. Depending on how we react is dependent on what we took in, how we interpret it, and how we then react to the world around us, and how we form and shape our universe. The greatest control that we need, the most primary control that we need is controlling what we eat. Because what we eat is what we physically become. What we physically become is how the mind becomes heightened, concentrated, or disturbed. So spiritual life begins with controlling the sense of taste. Then we go on then to a next aspect of this, and that is there are three types of worship. And we mentioned this briefly last week. So there are three types of worship mentioned, falling once more into the category of what is pure, what is illuminating, what is binding and egocentric, and what is dark and lazy, otherwise known as Sattva, Rajas, and Tapas. Even worship, therefore, can fall into one of these three categories. Apala kantashpir yajno videshtasto ya jayate yastavyam eveti manaha samadhaya sattikaha. The worship is sattvic when it is performed according to scriptural injunctions. Scriptural injunctions means that there are ritualistic rules for various ritualistic actions that assist in moving the mind forward and inward, moving the mind toward a meditative state. Therefore, to go against these scriptural injunctions, these scriptural injunctions will not be beneficial for you or others. Of course, the key to any sattvic movement is that we expect no reward, because that would be full of egoistic intention. We do every action purely for purity, and we notice that all the yajnas, the ancient yajnas, that is the havans, always have this injunction, not for my own benefit, but the benefit of others. So naturally, this is the highest form of sattva, and the highest form of sattva yajna. Sri Shankaracharya tells us something else, and the other day or yesterday I quoted from the Sundara Lahari, authored by Shankaracharya, and he makes this interesting and beautiful commentary. What he says is, he then attains the real fruit of worshipping the Supreme Lord, namely the peace that passeth understanding and self-fulfillment. At this stage, no separate spiritual discipline called worship exists for the spiritual practitioner. That means the sattvic kind of yajna or sacrifice has been elevated to do away with the scaffolding once you have the building. So therefore the purpose of this sattvika action, like all sattvika actions, is to make the mind pure, clean the mind, so that it becomes in a refined position and condition to have a revelation from within. So the Sundara Lahari of Sri Shankaracharya says this, O Mother of the Universe, he says, may my prattle be a japa of your name. The movements of my hands, etc., be the mudras or finger postures used in your puja. My wanderings be your circumambulation. My eating be the offering or the oblation offered for your sake. My lying down to sleep be prostration at your feet. Let my acceptance of all the pleasant things through my senses of sight, taste, smell, touch be with the awareness of surrender unto you, who are the embodiment of consciousness. That all my doings be thus acts of unceasing worship. This is truly sattvic. So, if we are able to sanctify all our actions, this becomes the highest kind of worship and the culmination of our sattvic action or sattvic worship that requires us to do this in accordance with scriptural injunctions designed for this purpose, and to have no reward in mind, and with their mind fixed on the yajna alone for its own sake, not to have the mind distracted by any other thing. In other words, the attention carries through because it's thought, undiluted and not contradicted, that creates the result. And then the other kind of yajna that is mentioned naturally is of the rajasic type. Abhisandhaya tu param dambhartam apichai vatmat. Ejate bharat shrestha tam yajna vidhi rajasam. But know that worship to be rajasic. Rajasic, or best of the paratas, which is performed in expectation of reward and for the sake of ostentation. We're always reminded of Sri Ramakrishna's story of the person who used to do the Durga Puja, very rich, wealthy person, and every year gave everybody a huge feast. And as time went on, the Durga Puja was no longer put on with such glory. In fact, it wasn't put on at all. And one day somebody asked him, why don't you put this great festival on where we had lots of feasting and great celebrations, balloons and joy? The whole village would be uplifted by this. And the man said, oh, you see, I've gotten so old. So by now, as you can see, and his mouth was empty of teeth, my teeth have all gone. In other words, I can't put on this festival because I can't enjoy the food. The only reason why I put the festival on is for the food. So this is clearly rajasic for one's own benefit. You have this great feast. So there's ostentation in this also, not just a reward, but there's a certain status. Look at what I'm doing. So this is of the rajasic type. No expectation of reward or showing off. This is what is meant by ostentation. And so, as I say, this is all embedded in Sri Ramakrishna's story. And then the next one describes the tamasic variety. So we go on to the Virihinam Ashratnam Mantratnam Adakshitam Shraddha Virhitam Yajnam Tamasam Parichakshati. That worship which is in contrary to ordinance, in which no food is distributed. If you have any kind of festival for the benefit of others, you'd surely expect some sharing. Don't forget, every meal you sit down for is a kind of yajna, according to the prayer that we recite. We're offering it into the digestive fire, offering it by the Lord, to the Lord, for the Lord, with the Lord. In that way, you eat. Then it becomes sacrificial food or sacramental food. But of course, to eat it all yourself, it ceases to become sacramental because it now becomes polluted. Whereas if you're doing it to share with others, this becomes sattvic. If you don't do it, it becomes tamasic. And then that which is performed in expectation for reward and ostentation and worship of the deities, worship which is contrary to ordinance, in which no food is distributed, and which is devoid of mantras. Why are mantras so important? Because mantras are mental movements loaded with intention that will shape the result for you. In other words, will mobilize the deities. This afternoon, we told about all the tanmatras, the subtle elements, the subtle forces. Otherwise, the theological language is devas, illuminating factors. These are all the devas. And in order to mobilize the devas, we can do it with egoistic intent. The devas will conform. The tanmatras are subtle primary elements. But they're all aspects of God's grace, distributed freely for us. And if we take it in this way and understand it in this way, then our ignorance goes, because we realize not only the holy usage of it, but we also realize that it is temporal. But if you don't use the mantras, then this becomes tamasic, devoid of intention and therefore full of darkness. And anything which is devoid of charity. Charity means a charitable outlook about things, a charitable disposition. Then faith as well. If you lack faith in what you're doing, all you're doing is superficial things, just for the sake of doing it. Doing it because somebody told you it should be done. In other words, doing it in the depth of ignorance or the darkness of ignorance. So even worship can be categorized in this, and now we go on to austerity. What is called tapasya? First, we have to explain what tapasya means. Unfortunately, tapasya gets a bad press because it means very often, or is interpreted as something like some hardship imposed, some kind of austerity. The word austere means a serious face is necessary. An austere person has to have a mouth down by their knees. And Vivekananda says, any person you meet like this, it's not spirituality, more than likely it's dyspepsia. Somebody filled with the light of knowledge will be bursting forth with it, will be like a child, will have a spirit of joy within them that spreads everywhere. So this is we can say tapasya, and the word tapas is not Spanish for food. The word tapas implies friction, the heat caused by friction. We saw in a passage from Patanjali Yoga Sutras and its commentary from Vivekananda, very insightful commentary, where he says, our difficulty is every time we make a move in our growth, we make a new channel, as it were, in the brain. And that automatically creates some resistance. Resistance causes friction. Friction causes heat. And so it becomes a struggle in the beginning. But there are 3 types of tapas, and later we find them also classified as sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. What are these 3 types of discipline? The first and most obvious is the body. How can we discipline and control the body? Deva dvija guru prajna Pujanam shocham arjavam. Brahmacharyam ahimsa cha shariram tapa uchate. Worship of the deities, that is, God's grace is flowing. God's grace is flowing, we call technically and philosophically tanmatras. Otherwise, also called bhutas, mahabhutas. These are the elemental forms that ultimately crystallize as our universe. And so to worship them, that is to be thankful for what they produce and how they are at our service. The twice-born teachers, that is, in the old system, in the caste system, that is, those who are given a thread to wear. Typically, of the four classical castes, this is the Brahmin, the Kshatriya, and also the merchant people. The vast majority of people are within this. Why should they be honored? Because their past samskaras, their past baggage that they carried over, has put them in a fortunate position. Of course, any fortunate position can be squandered and spoiled. And so these twice born should be honored because they have earned their place. Whether how they use it or not, that's another thing. And what about teachers? All teachers should have a generosity of spirit from the school teacher to the spiritual guru. One cannot be a spiritual guru, a competent teacher in the spiritual realm, unless your competency is saturated with generosity of spirit and pure love. There can be no better and higher love than the love of a guru. And so these teachers show us the way. These are the lights, the lamps that show us the way. You can see what a beautiful lamp these avatars are. People like Jesus, Buddha, Ram, Krishna. These are all lights sent to us to light up the way for generations to come, thousands of years. So teachers, dedicated teachers, naturally, they worship these entities. At the beginning of a meditation, it is often recommended that we make our salutation to the great sages, the rishis, the mystics, the saints, and also the teacher and teachers. So, and the wise, the sages, and cleanliness, simplicity, and continence, these three qualities. Our spiritual practice is cleaning the mind. And we mentioned this in great detail here in Gretz, that if you were to describe what is your occupation, don't say, oh, I'm a follower of so-and-so, or I'm a spiritual practitioner and I am here now. I was here, now I'm here. And then with puffed up chest, dress in a different way perhaps, or in some way show. You know, there's always an outward show that people have. Sometimes it's in the form of rosaries or rattling devices, we can call it. Rustling and rattling devices, just to show, look who I am. Marks. I often think, you see, of the story in Jesus' life of the Pharisee who is dressed in a certain way. Everybody knows who he is. A great scholar, a great pundit, goes to the front and declares, all his spiritual accomplishments and his relationship with God and how special he is and so on. The humble person at the back is the real spiritual aspirant who says, I'm not worthy. Window to the truth. The mind is the only means we have for the revelation, that is to create the ground for revelation to occur by itself. Cleanliness means external cleanliness and internal cleanliness, both. And simplicity, we have made life too complex. Be simple. So, continence, that is self-control of all the senses that primarily drive the biological person, namely the sense of procreation on the one hand, and the sense of sustaining our life through food on the other. These are said to be austerity of the body. Let us go through them again. We have to pray. Pray and worship. Adoration and thankfulness is what it consists of. This is part and parcel and the primary means of austerity of body. Secondly, we mentioned that the worship extends also, this is not only to God and God's graces, but also to others worthy of being an example to us in spiritual life. Secondly, that forms one category. Secondly, cleanliness, cleaning. Make sure the mind is clean, make sure the body is clean. This is tapasya of the body. Thirdly, we have to have continence and non-injury. Now, if we look at these carefully, we'll find pairs. So we'll find worship is one component, cleanliness another, simplicity another, like that. We'll find them coming in pairs, and so too with all of these tapas. Let us talk about this brahmacharya or continence. It's a difficult area. Does it mean to say we should all be monks and nuns? No. But we do have to have self-control. Even a dog has its season. And so therefore using it in a sacramental way, transforming it into something holy. All family life is holy. The procreation of the species should be viewed as a continuation of the original creation. It is a sacred act. So all of this falls under this tapasya of the body and simplicity. We have to take stock of our lifestyle and see what is the bare minimum we can get away with without being sad or deprived. What I call the feng shui principle. You look around and see all your clutter, and the feng shui principle is if you have not used this in 6 months, you have to get rid of it. And working on some of the things we said earlier, in nature there's a flow. Nature is only one thing, comprising waves. And where there seems to be a void, very quickly something else fills it. This was my thought of today. Whenever there's a seeming vacuum, something fills it. That vacuum becomes a suction, and something good fills it. So, in order to get something good, our life has to be simple. Simple food, simple clothing, simple furniture, and maybe not so simple books that might not come into this category. All right. What is the second kind of tapasya out of the three? Speech. Often we can do more harm with speech than injury. And unless we didn't emphasize it, the last component, of course, of this bodily tapasya is non-injury. We take it for granted. Non-injury means non-injury in thought, word, or deed. Not harming anything. But the opposite side of that coin is love. So engendering love, this is part of the tapasya of the body. Tapasya of speech. We can avoid not killing somebody, but words can kill somebody. Words can mortally injure somebody. Unkind words, unthought of words, careless speech, inconsiderate speech. So this is mentioned. So it goes on like this. Anudvegakram vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat swadhaya payasanam chaiva vanmayam tapa uchate. Words that cause offense, or the words that cause no offense, will be control of speech. Think carefully before you speak. And very often, good speech requires good listening. If we are not to offend somebody, we have to be expert listeners. What does listening mean? Very often, listening is really listening to ourselves and not the other. Listening requires empathy. That is, standing where the other person stands, wearing their moccasins. as it were. And it requires a keen power of observation. We need to see how the person's feeling. So all speech really is not information transfer. It's really reading, listening, and reacting on the emotional level. Control of speech is equivalent to controlling feelings. If we read a person's body language correctly, if we observe it correctly, if we listen to the unseen or unheard words, things that are picked up, for example, I always say, when a politician says, in my humble opinion, we can pretty much guarantee there's nothing humble about it. Look for the quiet negative, the unheard, unseen clues that we can pick up. And then it requires concentration, observation and concentration to understand what the speaker's mental field is, what their frame of mind exactly is. Very often it's not verbal, as I mentioned. Very often it's to do with body language. We are told that most of our communication is non-verbal communication. We know what a bad listener is like. A bad listener interrupts either mentally or with their speech. A bad listener may complete another person's sentences. A bad listener may, in order to please the other, prematurely nod or prematurely interject with a yes or a ha or a kind of agreement. These are some of the clues. Or another indication that you're not thinking is the glazed look. Sometimes somebody told me once about public speaking, you divide your audience into two sections. And you look on the one section and you see if a person is paying attention, you can see by the eyes. And because human attention span is very little, you look for the glazed look. And then you look for the other person on this side who is alert. And before long, they've gone off to the Bahamas or somewhere. And then you go to this side again. So it works like that, you see. So in order to cultivate non-offensive speech, we have to understand the other person on the emotional level. So I often make fun about the interruption. Very often happens in Ireland, I have to say. Sorry. So I'll give you an example. I'm telling somebody, I went to and they say, airport? No, the supermarket. And there I met a friend? No, my cousin. And then we discussed, family business? No, we were talking about the financial crisis. See, like that. It means no one's listening. If you're formulating an answer while somebody's talking, you're not listening. So this is the discipline of speech, is also the discipline of the ear. Anyway, if you do this properly and you have an empathetic attitude, a compassionate attitude, a loving attitude, then you will not cause injury by words. So words that cause no offense and which are truthful. Now here's an interesting one. Because if we're not to injure somebody, then sometimes will it contradict with truthfulness? So there's an old saying, you see, where there is a husband and wife saying, and she says, do I look fat in this? What will you answer? Will you offend the person by saying, yes, you do? Or will you tell that's telling the truth? Or will you opt for untruth and being inoffensive? We leave this up to you. It's your problem, not mine, since I don't find myself ever in this situation. But truthfulness means really going to the ultimate source. The ultimate truth is the ultimate reality. And the closer you are to this reality, the more this truth will express itself. And the truth about life is that truthfulness is also purity, because lack of truth means self-deception, and self-deception will have its repercussion. That is, if you tell falsehood, falsehood comes to you. If you live in a false environment and are false to another person, then it will come onto you as well. So be truthful, because truthfulness and truth is part of being pure. Purity is there. Be pleasant. That is, make an extra effort in your speech. And also beneficial. Make your speech joyful. There are some cultures, I won't mention names, who enjoy being pessimists. So you ask, how is the weather? These people live in a notoriously bad climate. How is the weather? Their joy is in complaining. Oh, it's terrible, terrible. And the motorway was full. And I had to wait for hours and this. Otherwise, I had a nice day. They start like that. And so words that are pleasant and beneficial. In other words, words that will uplift another person. It requires that extra effort. I have to say the Irish are typically good at this. Yeah? Because they have these phrases. You see, they don't say thanks. They say thanks a million. They're wonderful. And so all these phrases reflect outlooks also. And also regular recitation of scriptures. Here we can ask, did you read this? Did you read that? Did you study the Upanishads? Or did you study the Bhagavad Gita? Or any of these scriptures, Gospel of Ramakrishna, etc.? Somebody might say, oh, I read it. Yeah, but did you study it? That means, did you repeat it? Did you recite it over and over again until you caught the meaning? Did you catch the fact that every word is a sacred word? Every word is a mantra in scripture. What is scripture? Scripture is the recitation of, or the repetition of, somebody's direct experience of the supreme, the divine, the ultimate truth. And when you hear it again, you have the opportunity of standing where that person stands in a meditative way and getting revealed what they saw, finding out what was the wiring inside these ancient sages and rishis that came up with these profound discoveries. And I was surprised to see here that I asked, have you studied any of the Upanishads? Amongst many long-standing devotees who say no. Oh, what do you study here then? And then somebody says, oh, I studied that book. I once saw a very funny cartoon, two monks in a cell, a confined place in a monastery. And one is offering the Bible to the other. And the other one says, oh, thanks, I read it. And we can upgrade it as well. No, thanks, I saw the movie. Or I'll wait for the movie. See, it's not a novel. It's a handbook, a manual on spiritual life. It's a direction on spiritual life. We have to use the experience of others and absorb it in our own life and practice it accordingly. So, regular recitation of the scriptures we can add with understanding. These are said to be austerity of speech. When somebody asks you, what discipline should I do? What is the meaning of tapasya? How should I conduct my spiritual life? These are the three keys. You need to engage in tapasya. And tapasya is of these three varieties. Body, speech, naturally the next is mind. Manaha prasadaha samnityam maunam atma vine graha bhavasam suthir ityatat tapo manasam uchate. Serenity of mind, gentleness, silence, self-control, purity of heart. These are said to be mental austerity. Let us take each one. Serenity of mind. When a mind is distracted and jumps all over the place from here to there, they need to make it calm and serene. Entering into a poised position inside you where pure consciousness rests will immediately make the mind serene. Somebody who comes with mental tension, I often give them an exercise. Please sit on a chair. Now, please get up and walk from the door to the chair. Do that. Does it. Probably thinking, here's a mad Swami. Sit on the chair. I said, now, what happened? I walked from the door to the chair. Okay. Now, your imagination, repeat the process. This time, don't think I am walking from the door to the chair. This time, think somebody. I am watching somebody. You give it the name that you go by normally, is walking from A to B. As soon as they dissociate with the action, they feel calm. It's the association with all of the body and mind and concerns and doubts and fears and temptations, a jumping mind, what they call monkey mind. Whenever that happens, we find this disturbance. And how do we create a serenity of mind? We know from other passages that we have to do karma yoga. We have to make the mind serene in the workplace with all the jungle of life, dealing with it in a calm way. This is part of generating serenity of mind. Not disturbed by anything. Some surprise comes in life, some curveball comes. With an adventurous attitude, you take it and are not affected by it in the least, knowing the temporary nature of life. And knowing that there is nothing in life that presents life's problems that does not have the capacity to deal with them. If nature comes up and provides all the problems and difficulties, it also provides every solution. Gentleness. Be gentle. Be gentle with your own mind. How to control the mind is like how to control an animal. We don't take a horse and beat it. Some do. We don't use the carrot and stick method for the mind. We don't use reward and punishment. These are short-term effective means, but not long-term. They will not change the habit level. Encouragement will change it. Coaxing the mind. There are many techniques of speaking to the mind. Oh, my mind, addressing it like a kind uncle or aunt. Oh, my mind, what do you want? You have this option, you have that option. Why don't you choose the best thing? Why don't you evaluate it properly? And come on, encourage it. Now, the opposite of that is to repeat endlessly. You are a worm, you are worthless, you are a sinner, you are nothing. And so any theology that promotes this will promote weakness. But what we promote is strength. This whole Bhagavad Gita is around the wonderful virtue of strength, strength of mind, strength of body, strength of mind. We have to overcome our weakness. Weakness is ignorance. Knowledge is strength. So gentleness with ourselves and others, in our mind, even thinking. We are not permitted to go and kill somebody. We are not permitted to kill somebody with words. But nor are we permitted to think about it. Thought, word, and deed. Non-injury in this is what is meant by ahimsa. Silence. There is too much noise. And if it's not outside, it's in the head. So much traffic going on. All the Paris traffic or Dublin traffic coming into the head. And the more technology advances and the more our lifestyle becomes more complicated and more technologically astute, the more noise we seem to like. I have just given you a silence. You need to ask yourself, were you uncomfortable with it? One of the key exercises in meditation or helping people in spiritual practice and on retreats, all our retreats, which are not done on Zoom or anything like that, are all silent retreats. How do you manage with silence? It is only in the silence that you hear the inner, sweet, still voice of God. The voice of silence is to be found within. We reduce the external noise. External means external outside, and external, the mind is still outside. It's outside the witness of it. One is interior to the other, no doubt, and more subtle than the other, no doubt. But one is still outside that. So the external, as it were, that is the external mind and body, and all the environment and areas around that form the outside for us. Practicing silence or mona is a wonderful discipline. I have known somebody who once a day took a vow of silence. We do a lot of fasting for the body, but part of the fasting will be maintaining a silence. And that outward silence will create an inner silence too. So practicing mona, practicing silence. There was a silent retreat in France here at the ashram in Gretz. And I got some feedback. And part of the feedback was also saying how they were happy to talk after the silent retreat. But my experience is the opposite. When we do the silent retreat, nobody wants to speak afterwards. They are so instilled with silence. Silence has gotten into their very bones. They're reluctant to speak. So this is definitely a self-control that is required. And then self-control and purity of heart. Self-control, all the senses reside in the mind. Don't think that the senses are the external parts of the body, but we can control the senses by finding out, oh, my mind, what do you like the best? Food is presented. What do you like the best? Oh, I like this. And the mouth salivates. And you say, well, too bad. Today you won't have it. But transmuting a thing is important. Sublimating a thing is important. The other way of doing it is take it, all food, as sacred offerings, and enjoy it, every morsel of it, by being mindful of its taste, its feeling in the mouth, and its compatibility with sattvic food that we covered last week. Food which is energizing, that promotes health and vitality, is sattvic food, is liked by the sattvic people. So purity of heart, that is deep down inside. Purity of heart is purity of mind. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God, says Jesus. All of our spiritual endeavor is purifying the mind, purity, seeing God in all things everywhere. These all are said to be mental austerity. And it's good to study these aspects of tapasya and make it a kind of checklist to see what kind of tapasya and what more tapasya we need to engage in. So there are also threefold austerities according to the gunas. Sadhaya, paraya, taptam, tapastat, tivitam, naraya. Apalakam, ksipir, yuktai, sattikam, parikashati. The threefold austerity practiced with the utmost faith by steadfast people. Practice is not practice unless it's steadfast, steady practice, same time, every day, steadily, same duration, same quality if possible. Without desire for the fruit, declared as sattvika. See how this is repeated. Anything that has no desire for fruit is sattvic, because desire for fruit engages this I, me, mine, je, moi. The austerity which is practiced with the object of gaining recognition, praise, and adoration, and for mere show, is said to be rajasika. It is unstable and it is transitory. And then the austerity which is practiced out of foolish notion by means of self-torture or for the purpose of injuring another is called tamasika. You won't have to go very far when you see people brutalized in the body in the name of austerity. But this is tamasika. People put huge nails in their backs and drag coaches along, or they put big spikes in their cheeks. So this is obviously tamasika. Now there are 3 types of charity and so on and so forth. We'll pick this up next week also. But we are now on the 19th stanza. We'll recover some of those next week also. In the 17th chapter, the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And this is a relatively short chapter. So we have only up to another 28 total stanzas are there. So another few stanzas are there to go. That means next week we will finish this off. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.